Oh, what a beautiful name tag someone made you, Evan.
Yeah, right. You're welcome.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the January 18th special Board of Selectmen's meeting, where we're going to be talking about the Kennebunkport Climate Action Plan. And at the end of the meeting, this meeting is not a storm update, it's a climate action plan update, but at the end of the meeting, Lori will give an update on the storm actions here in town. So I'm going to turn it over to Pam Morgan from the Kennebunkport Climate Action Plan Initiative, and she's going to make a presentation with her group. Maybe you'll introduce the whole group.
I will,
Yeah,
yes.
good.
So one piece of business, because Alan is remote, we have to recognize that he's remote and he's out of town, and you gotta hear his voice.
Okay. I didn't realize, I just thought he was absent. So.
No,
Okay.
he's on Zoom, so can
He's
you
on
make
Zoom.
sure
I
we
can
can
do it.
hear?
Can you hear us, Alan?
Hold on, he got kicked out of being a panelist somehow. I need to re-promote him.
Alrighty.
I've asked him to unmute.
Yeah. Alan, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, good. So Alan, as you can notice, is not here in body, but he's here in spirit via Zoom.
And in
voice. And in voice, and in voice. Okay.
Thank you.
All set? Okay, great. So thank you very much for spending the time with us tonight. As you all know, this is a workshop that we asked to have with the Board of Selectmen to go over the work that we've been doing as a task force for the town climate action plan. So what I'm going to do is just go through a few slides first to kind of bring you up to speed with what we've been working on in the process and introduce the task force and a few other things. And then hopefully the bulk of the time will be spent in discussion, talking about the strategies and the plan itself. So first though, next, can you pull up the slides? And there we go. Thanks. So yes, if you're home listening, you can go to the town website and get all the documents that the select board has to look at tonight. And that might be helpful to you as we work our way through the discussion. So next slide, please. The task force, for those of you who don't know, was formed, I think it was about a year ago, appointed by the board. These are the current members of the task force. I'm Pam Morgan. I'm the chair of the task force. Jen Armstrong, who couldn't be here tonight, is the vice chair. Fred, raise your hand. Fred Stafford, Harvey Flashen, I know he's on Zoom. Ella Boxell, who is a student at the University of Maine, Orono, so she's not here tonight. Steve is here, Steve Kagan. And John Dykstra and Mike Weston also are on the task force, as well as, part of the Board of Selectmen. So that's the group that's been working really hard to try to come up with a plan for the town. Next slide. So the purpose of this plan, so I just want to clarify too that, with everything that's been going on in the last couple of weeks and all the storms and everything that's happened, I know there's a lot on people's minds, but we started working on this plan like a year ago, and the idea here is a plan to help move the town forward in preparing for the impacts of climate change. So that's really what we're going to focus on tonight. And the purpose of the plan, as it says here, is to ensure that our town will remain economically and environmentally viable in the decades to come. We want to protect the health and vitality of the town. We also want to use the plan to position the town to receive state and federal climate grants now and in the future. And also with existing funds, help prioritize how to use those strategically as we plan ahead for climate change. So this is sort of the general purpose of the plan that we've been working on. Next. All right, so what is the plan based on? What have we been doing? First, I want to be clear that we spent quite a bit of time gathering lots of information to go into the plan. We looked at our town's comprehensive plan, and there's actually a handout that shows some overlap, a lot of overlap between what's in our comprehensive plan and what we're proposing be in the climate plan. We also looked at the 2020 Select Board Climate Goals. There's a document that also shows what back in 2020 the Select Board agreed they should be doing to prepare for climate change for with the town. And then Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission actually worked with us and 3 other towns, and actually thanks to Lori Smith, who helped bring together these 4 towns in a cohort to work with Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission on developing our climate action plans. So each town is doing a separate plan, but we've been working together and helping each other. And I should have introduced also tonight, I'm sorry, we've got Karina and Abby, who are here from Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission to help answer questions that maybe the task force is.
And those 4 towns are?
And the 4 towns are Biddeford, Kennebunkport, Kennebunk, and Kittery. Those were in the group. So we've got all this information. We also have done a lot of community outreach. We had first a survey where 381 people responded to our survey. From that survey, we asked a question at the end, would you like to be more involved in the discussions? We got a lot of people saying, yes, please involve us more. 16 followed through and became members of what we called our Community Sounding Board. And so the Community Sounding Board met with us many times over the last year to give us feedback along the way. We also made presentations to a bunch of different groups, including Rotary, the Beach Advisory Committee, Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, Chamber of Commerce, the high school students, and Public Health Department. We've had 2 public meetings so far at Graves Library, one in the summer and one in the fall, that were open to the general public to come. And we've also done interviews with business owners, as well as we had a meeting in conjunction with Kennebunk with Port and Lower Village business owners to kind of get their input on all of this. And we're still meeting with people from staff from RSU 21 to see how we can collaborate with the schools as well. So just to let you know, we've been doing a lot of listening, sharing what we're working on, and getting input from folks. Next slide. The other thing the plan is based on is 2 important documents that you can get from the town website. One is the greenhouse gas emissions study that the town had done a few years back that talks about how what kinds of greenhouse gases are being emitted here in the community. And also really important is our vulnerability assessment. So what this document does is it looks at how is Kennebunkport vulnerable to the impacts of climate change? What things specifically are going to impact our town? So that's a very important document because we needed to understand the impacts if we wanted to then be able to come up with strategies about those impacts. Next slide. So speaking of impacts, these slides actually we put in this presentation before the events that just happened, but I think it's worth a couple slides quickly to show you. People often ask us, well, sea level rise, obviously that's something that right here on the coast we're very concerned about. The state of Maine does have some maps that we refer to often, and you can go online and find them, and you can plot out different sea level rise scenarios. So this first slide just shows a little bit of, there's the river you can see, and Dock Square's off to the right. This blue water on here is showing what's known as the highest astronomical tide today. So this is like the highest high tide that we would see normally. And if we can have the next slide, you can choose different scenarios. So here is what would happen if we had 1.5 feet of sea level rise. And this actually is what the state of Maine in their climate action plan says we should commit to manage for by 2050. So you can look at the map now and see the light green area. Next slide. And then if we go further, if we're looking at 3.9 feet, which we should commit to manage by 2100, you can see obviously the flooding gets to be more extensive. So we're putting these here just to let you know that there are maps and tools that can be used by communities to help them plan ahead. And the final one that we put in, just one more slide, Just to show you for that same scenario of 3.9 feet by 2,100, this is the flooding we could anticipate due to sea level rise down at Goose Rocks Beach. So just to let you know, sea level rise, there are resources out there to help us understand what we could be looking at in the future. Next slide. So obviously sea level rise has been a big concern. Other really big community concerns that we heard about, natural and built environment. So people said, and in our survey, more than 80% of people mentioned or said yes, they were concerned about this. Our beaches, marshes, riverfront roads, waterfront houses, and businesses. They also said they were concerned about our critical infrastructure, water, sewer, as well as power and internet, which is also at risk due to damage from sea level rise and increasing storm severity. Local economy, especially tourism and fishing, people were concerned about that, but not as many. The survey, actually, there was about 56% of people who said they were concerned about that. And then finally, public services will be strained, like the town operations, to keep the community safe in more extreme weather. So those were the biggest community concerns from the survey. Next slide. And overall takeaways, just to kind of summarize a little bit for you, what people told us over these months, that our environment or the landscape, these are the basis for not just the tourist industry, but it's why people want to live here. This is one of the big reasons why we love being in Kennebunkport. It's a beautiful place to live. And people want to make sure that we can maintain that into the future and the town can help us to protect it. And we heard a lot about people's concerns about development and worrying about development that threatens our dunes, our marshlands, our water sources, and our forests. People also talked a lot about education and community involvement and how important that is. People have to understand more what to expect and also what can be done. And finally, just that we need to expand the discussion beyond simply looking at the coast. Of course, the coast is super important to us, but there's also freshwater flooding we need to pay attention to. Things like drought can also be an issue, and of course, heat that we can be expecting in the future. So this is what we've heard from people in terms of public engagement. Next. And just a couple of quotes that we pulled out that kind of exemplify some of the things people said in the community meetings. Go ahead, next one. Protecting natural resources is most important because erosion is a serious problem, and if we do not deal with it, it will continue to evolve. Creating hard armoring solid surfaces and walls is a bad policy as it makes erosion worse. We should encourage vegetation, natural solutions, as these retain sand and help reduce the amount of damage along coastlines. Many people talked about this. This is just some example quotes from some of the sessions. Next. We also heard from people, if you can click again, I'm concerned about saltwater intrusion on our well and on our septic system. And next, also people wanted to think about and have some action on regulating and changing policies so we can have some doable change, was a quote. It's important to regulate and change policies soon for some doable change. And next slide. In terms of our meetings with the businesses, they really talked about how this economic piece is going to dictate how long businesses can stay in their current locations. They said we can't raise the buildings, their buildings they own, without other buildings and the sidewalk going higher too, for example, and that businesses don't really know what to do beyond the obvious things. They would like to understand more about the options they have and specific plans on various ways to respond to the crisis. They said that would be helpful. Strategies to address challenges to flooding in Dock Square, options for businesses to choose from to mitigate these impacts. That's what we heard from the business community. Next. Okay, so that leads us to the strategies. So all these strategies that we put together in the plan for your review, they're draft right now. This is why we're here to talk about them and to improve, get feedback. But we sort of clumped them into three general categories that we felt helped to organize them, because there are a number of them. The first category are strategies that are going to help us build resiliency. The second, reduce emission. And the third, enable action. I'm just going to show a couple pictures to illustrate those, and then we can kind of dive into the actual strategies. So next slide. What do we mean by building resiliency? So what exactly do we mean by resiliency? So resiliency is really our ability to adapt to the changes that are happening around us, and not just to adapt to them, but if you're resilient, you can bounce back, right? You can recover. So how do we build resiliency? That's what these strategies are going to help us do. For example, on the left, you can see the road is flooded. This might be, we have to think about infrastructure. How do we create resilient infrastructure? Does it mean raising roads, for example, key roads in the community? Related to this, too, is disaster preparedness. So we need to be prepared for these disasters to make sure that people stay safe. That's all about building resiliency. And the picture on the right you can see is really energy resilience. So how do we prevent losing power? And then how, if we do lose power, for example, what do we do about that? And again, how do we keep people safe? Next slide. There are other ways to build resiliency that are more natural ways to build resiliency, and these pictures sort of illustrate that. The marshes on the left, that's actually Biddeford Pool. It's not in Kennebunkport, but I think it illustrates really well how these marshes that we are lucky enough to have along our coast, they are buffers. When the sea level rises or when there's storm events, it's known that those marshes slow down the energy of the waves and help to protect the houses and infrastructure that's behind them. So we need to do everything we can to protect those marshes because they are protecting us. Same thing with our wetlands, like the picture on the right. Wetlands are very important when there are big flood events from fresh water. If there's a heavy rainfall and a lot of water is coming down, those wetlands are like sponges. They absorb all the water and then release it slowly. So everything we can do to protect our wetlands will ultimately protect us as well. So that's building resiliency using more natural things. Next. Reducing emissions, I think that's pretty straightforward. We're talking here about how do we not emit as many greenhouse gases, primarily carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere. Examples, supporting electric vehicles, like electric school buses perhaps, and also energy efficiency, helping homeowners to weatherize so that they're not losing as much heat from their homes, so they don't have to burn as many fossil fuels, would be two examples of reducing emissions. And then finally, next slide, is enabling action. And in this category, a couple of examples for you. On the left is a picture that illustrates, it's actually one of our community sounding boards, but it could be what we're envisioning as a climate committee that the town could form of volunteer citizens it would be a committee that would work to help implement some of the strategies that are in the plan. And another example would be continuing to enable municipal operations and funding to help with climate change impacts. A lot of these things are already in the town budget, but we want to make sure that we can continue to prioritize and spend our money wisely. So those are just a couple of examples of enabling action. A couple more slides and then we'll start to work. Next slide. So in terms of implementation of the plan, remember, when we put this plan together, in the end, it's going to consist of recommendations, and any of the strategies in the plan that require town funding obviously would have to go for budget review. Strategies that require ordinance revisions have to go to the select board and to voters for approval. And this volunteer climate action committee that we're suggesting would support public outreach and the implementation of the plan. Next. And so next steps, all right, we need your feedback, Board of Select people, on the strategies so we can get them ready to put into the final plan. After we have your feedback, after tonight's discussion, we hope to then hold another community presentation. We'll probably do one on Zoom for folks who aren't in town at the moment and another one in person to gather more public input on the plan. And also people can always give feedback via the town's website. There's a link that you can go to give us feedback. And our goal is to then in March come back to the select board with a climate action plan that would be voted on by the select board. So that's sort of where we're looking to go. So the rest of our time tonight is really going to be spent on digging into the strategies. And in the packets that we gave you, there's a colorful one. There's 4 pages of strategies that Southern Maine Planning Development commission helped us, these are the handouts that we've used, similar handouts when we've presented to community groups to sort of summarize the strategies that we've come up with. And then you also have in your packet some more detail about examples of those strategies that we can refer to if that's helpful. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna open it up so that you all on the board can ask us questions, give us comments, feedback, ideas, and we can just get the discussion going. That would be great. So thanks for listening to the intro.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
John, you're the discussion leader.
Oh, I would be happy to hop in. So that, again, is the intro in trying to sum up what we've been endeavoring to do over the past 12 months. You have the executive summary that hope you've had a chance to read, talking about the focuses, how we see this as a regional effort as well as an individual effort, that these towns will be working together cooperatively where that makes sense. Also the importance of reaching out to the RSU 21 group in that regional sense. So this extends beyond just our town lines. And what I'll do is just ask, I don't know if you would like to go individually, but if people have on the board have some questions for either clarification or explaining your position on things, that would be very useful. I guess it's important for people to know that because of the functioning of public meetings, the board has not had a chance to talk to each other in a group. This is the time that we're doing this. So you are present to watch the sausage be made. So and thank you for being here as part of that. So Mary Beth, I'll start on my left. Or is it,
Okay, so I just have I have a lot. So stop me whenever anybody else wants to jump in. So I had a question about, because I don't understand, the hard armory statement in the presentation. So what about that is bad?
What about hard armoring is bad?
Yeah.
I can try and answer that one. So the problem with seawalls is that if you put a seawall up at the edge of the beach, for example, the waves come in, they hit the seawall, and then they reflect downward, and in reflecting downward, they scour the sand at the base of the seawall, and by doing that, it actually makes the beach erode more in front of the seawall over time, makes the water deeper, and at the edges, the ends of the seawall has to end at one side or the other. The water then, the energy of the water goes around the ends of the seawall and scours out there. So if you can come up with a solution that doesn't involve a seawall, it's a better strategy overall. And that's why those community members were saying if we can come up with other ways to deal with the wave energy. In some situations, green will work better, but when you have very high energy environments, those kinds of things might not work. But that's where we bring in the experts to really help us understand in what situation are different things most effective.
Yeah, and I
But
think
that's sort of the answer to your question.
Thank you for that. So I think, where I was thinking with that, because I am a member of the Paul Hogan Beach Grass Planting.
Oh, you
Dunes.
are, I'm sorry
And my
about your
husband
beach grass.
sitting back there. Yeah, so we, go out and Paul gets us all together. We go out and do our plantings, and then we watch Mother Nature take them away. So I think that's the thing when I was reading through this, and specifically in the view of the last storm. Again, astronomical high tide, nor'easter comes in, so worst, check. This is as hard as we're gonna get it, hopefully. But that's where I'm sort of struggling with this. And I actually had, during our communication with our trip around with the select board and that meeting on Sunday when we were reviewing the storm damage. It seems like Mother Nature has an awesome force, and really, there's only so much we're going to be able to do, and it's going to become what it's going to become at some point. So I think, when we talk about it, when I read through this, I was trying to find some common ground of thought between my thinking and what the committee had put forward in this presentation. And I think, where I had gone through is relating to the common areas of infrastructure. And those are things that I know, we've started to address within the town. Like you said, Pam, in our budgeting process, there's, years out where we're going to be addressing things. And so that's like, the presentation or preservation of what we can do. But I don't really see us, and I know John might feel differently, but I just don't see how we can really protect the dunes or orchestrate above Mother Nature about what our seascape's really going to end up being 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I'm in the position when I'm thinking about what's in front of us of saying, okay, what do we need to be resilient? So I really resonate with that part of the presentation. But I don't really see us being able to do anything. When we saw the waves and the surge move granite boulders this past storm, and it's like, okay, thanks for the reminder from Mother Nature of who you really are and what you can do. And I was talking to a friend that lives down in Florida, and it was so interesting because it's like we're looking up here like, what can we do, to preserve? And they sort of just roll with it. It's like hurricane comes in, okay, rebuild. It's just like an automatic switch where I don't think we're of that mindset here, because we really haven't, knock on wood, been hit as hard as, other coastal towns. So I do think, in terms of resiliency, I'd like to talk through that part of it. But I have to be honest. I don't think on the protection part, we can try to plant grass and it might make us feel good, but at some point a wave might come in and just take it away. And I will continue probably to answer Paul Hogan's call and go and plant grass. But I know it might just be a social occasion that we're getting together and doing something nice and making ourselves feel good. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is on the mission side. So in the report, there were some things that I had not a good reaction to. So I'm not one for regulations. I don't believe as this community size that we can really stop, we can't stop climate change, right? So it is coming at us at the size that we are. We can do things, again, to make ourselves feel better. And anyone that wants to do that should have the freedom to do that. But I didn't really resonate with some of the things about like developments and requirement EV chargers. Those things I was like, I can't sign up for that. That was too far for me.
Let's if I may, and let's hold that thought, because let's address the first one about the shorelines and the
Okay.
resilience,
Yep.
so we can try to put that to ground, and then we'll pick up the next
Yep.
one about the
Yep.
mission piece. And I don't disagree with you at all that in terms of Goose Rocks, I would think certainly in terms of Colony Beach, anything along Wambi, when you are directly facing the open ocean, and even our East Fair Rocks at Goose Rocks, unfortunately at a very high tide, don't do a lot to stop the energy. Soft green shorelines aren't going to cut it. I think that's certainly my opinion. And so I would not propose, personally speaking, trying to replace the dunes. I think it is going to be a hardscape, or it's not going to be. Let me say this: I think the hardscape can buy us decades. It's a matter of time and what we're looking at. I totally agree with you. 50 to 100 years from now, I don't believe anything that we do on Goose Rocks is going to support it. I believe it's going to come from the tidal, from the marsh side first, rather than the high-energy ocean, but the sea level is coming, and that's a fact. But I do, and again, the question's only going to be, in my opinion, of how you find the funds to pay for this. And it's not something I can see the town doing. These are going to have to be found different ways to put together consortiums or something to get this done. It's a lot of decisions that have to be made down the road. So as far as the type of shoreline, it's going to depend on where we are. If you're in more of a marsh area in the back of the Cape Porpoise Harbor, soft shoreline may make indeed the most sense. But in the high energy zones, it's going to be our marine or nothing.
Can I just interject for just a second? Because I'm totally agreeing what you guys are talking about here, and I want to be clear that it's very site-specific. So what John was saying, when you're out on the beachfront and there's huge waves, you know, putting a living shoreline is not going to work, right? So it's a gradation from hard structures to more natural green structures, depending on the situation. So I'm wondering if, like we have as one of these build resiliency objectives says, promote and enable nature-based solutions for shoreline protection and carbon sequestration. Why don't we add where appropriate?
Yeah.
If that's a concern that we're saying, we're not necessarily trying to say that this is all that we would do as a town, is only use nature-based solutions. I think if we added the words where appropriate, because as John said, on the marsh side, I think, and where there's not as much wave energy, those kinds of solutions can work really well.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I would disagree. Yeah.
Okay.
I live on the marsh, and I live on the harbor. And I've been doing everything I can by planting bushes and trees and everything else along that for 20-something years. And this last storm came all the way up to my house. So we're talking 80 feet, excuse me, 80 feet of water that was previously lawn, and so I hope it's still gonna be lawn when,
Right.
eventually. But it caused a lot of damage. So then I was over at Goose Rocks Beach today, because John had had tipped me off a little while ago about and sent some pictures about where the dunes were carved out. And get to the hardscape versus the softscape, let's talk. So I went down to Jeffrey's Way because we had some concern about down there. So I went both ways. Where the hardscape is, nothing happened to the beach. Not much, anyway, happened to the beach. And just to the left of it, 50 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet, it's 5 feet high, the cliff where the dunes are gone, it's just
Right.
like this. So I think that the hardscaping, some of the big boulders were moved by the tide, but the hardscaping prevented along that way those houses from being damaged. And if you go up to the west end where they had all the problem, we went up there today. I wanted to take a look at that as well. And that is a similar situation where they have hardscaping, very little, I wouldn't say very little, there's some damage, but the rest of it is carved out.
Yeah.
So, and the marsh, speaking of marshes, they had to close Route 1 down over in Scarborough for the second time in a short period of time. And if you go, you can take a look at all the damage. There's not a lot of damage there now, but all the bushes and the marsh grass, it's all mowed over and so forth. So I'm with Mary Beth and John a little bit on that. I don't know, and I hate to say this, I don't know what we can do, or if what we do will prevent the issue in the future, because this is 3 times now since December a year ago that this has happened, and the houses up the street are flooded, the houses in the back are flooded. Goose Rock Beach has had, it's all, all the problems with the sand and stuff, so I'm with John and Mary Beth. I don't know what we can do, and whatever we do is a Band-Aid.
So can I just ask you quickly, like, you said your house is on the marsh? You have marsh between your lawn and the water? Is there marsh, tidal marsh?
It's Eel Creek.
Behind?
Eel Creek,
Because I
yeah.
think the point is that marsh, it does get flooded, but even though it's getting flooded, it's slowing down that water, and the waves that are coming at you, it probably would have reached your house if the marsh wasn't there.
Never got flooded before.
Well, I
So,
understand
yeah.
that.
There's really no energy coming in.
There's no
from the
energy
back.
coming
It's
in there.
Sampson Cove.
Sampson
It's that
Cove, yeah.
back place. But
So I do quite, I agree with Mary Beth and John. I don't know what we can do. And I spent today watching, there was a very good, maybe you've seen it, this two-part videos that the University of Maine at Orono students did a couple of years ago. I think it was maybe last year. I went back to review that to see if, they studied solutions on the river, okay? And take a look at that to see if any of that would have an impact on beaches, or if there's something we could get there. And they ended up recommending, I'm trying to remember everything, it was like storm doors and raising buildings.
Right, these were the engineering
Yeah,
students,
yeah,
right?
I mean,
Yeah.
it's really, if you get a chance to see it.
I have seen
Have you
it,
seen it?
yeah.
It's really good. And so I've taken a look at that, I'm saying, we're screwed. So
you're going to get a little more hope in this.
Yeah, well, you know me, I'm all for whatever we can do.
Right.
But this last year has shown me, and look at, all you can do is look at downtown,
Yeah,
and just a normal high tide.
right.
And
Our low-lying areas, yeah.
Low-lying areas,
Are
yeah,
at a
yeah.
risk, and that's what we're looking at in terms of doing what we can to keep the element of resiliency for the majority of the people in the town. And that's looking at the transportation to try to be sure that we can get emergency vehicles where they need to be. That's certainly an important aspect of what the town can do. Having resiliency hubs, trying to make sure our electric infrastructure is in place, the town can do. But when it comes to armoring individual properties, it's going to be very difficult for the town to be, it's in my opinion, and
Yeah,
we
you're
have
right.
to see, to get involved with that.
Yeah, you're right.
And so this is going to be a real challenge for those that are in nature's crosshairs. And that is a lot of what's on the east arc of the beach. It's a lot of what's at the head of the harbor and what's in the low-lying areas on the marsh at the beach. And these are going to be some tough questions that we're going to have to look at.
I'm just concerned that my taxes are gonna go up because now I'm oceanfront.
Well, yeah.
On both sides.
Well, yeah.
You're your own island. So I think on the resilience, so if I go to your white part of your detailed plan.
Yeah, it's good.
Which, again, I just want to step back, because we just sort of jumped in. And so I want to just quickly step back and say, look, I know how much time and effort, this committee has put into this, and how much work and how well you've worked together. I've heard great things from John and Mike and Lori in terms of the collectiveness of the team. So I just want to say thank you for all the work. So all the comments that you're hearing now is a communication back and forth. It does not bemoan, the appreciation of what you guys have already accomplished.
Let's jump on the positive things that we can really
Right,
impact
no,
right
for
now.
sure.
Yeah.
And, because there's enough in here that we can address, enough.
So I think so from my perspective, if I go to your, detail.
The more detailed.
Yeah, because that was it was helpful to me to understand like what you guys were actually thinking of. If I said, okay, create resilient infrastructure, and I'm the type of person that we used to call it's probably not a correct thing to say, but in business we used to call one throat to choke. So I like to always be able, you had a point of contact, so it was always a one throat to choke,
Oh, I get it.
for
We call it a
business.
belly button,
Yeah.
but you can, it's just, we were a softer group.
Yeah,
you know.
well, we weren't so soft. But So I would say, okay, number one, I would look to Chris and Eric within the town, right? Because from a board, I would want that one point focus to say, okay, Chris and Eric, and if they need to work with other agencies, or like they do with consultants for other part of our projects, that's the group. I don't necessarily think I'd come back to the climate committee for that. I think from a board, we'd wanted that. I think from the work that you guys did, you can come forward and say, here's things that I think you guys should look at, and bring that back to the board, and then we can bring that forward to Chris and Eric. But I would like that funnel. I'd like one cook in the kitchen. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Yeah,
Or a couple cooks in the kitchen, but, yeah.
sous chef.
Yeah, but I think that, what we're looking at is, obviously what Lori has brought forward at the last board meeting on what's on the capital plan and the projects coming forward, the things that you guys already know that we're doing. So is there, I think, in March now or in March, to come back and say, here's other areas that we've talked with Mike and John, and we don't think that you've really thought through these other areas, and we've talked to other towns, or this is our view, and we think you should add this into the plan. I think that would be, a really good feedback from people that have had their eyes and ears and thinking about this. For me, Goose Rocks Beach, that's where I'm just gonna back up what Mike said again, just because I think it's an important point. We've spent a lot of time with Softscape telling people what they can plant or can't plant down at the beach and stuff. I think that's all very good. But again, if we're gonna look at, through the lens of how do we deflect some of Mother Nature's wrath when she decides to stretch out, then I think hardscape has to be forefront, and I'm not sure, do we have issues of why when you go down Jeffrey's Way and go right, why those people never hardscaped? Were there
No, there
environmental-
aren't, there's none there, you're
Well,
right.
No.
When you
but-
go
but
west,
are
when you
there
go west.
Yeah, are there,
Yeah.
were
Those
there
are lots.
were they
Those-
DEP things or regulations of why they couldn't hardscape?
Well, no, but there were no homes there. Historically, there was no reason to hardscape there because the homes are all behind Kings Highway. There's no home on the beachfront there, on that primary dune.
No, as soon as
I'm
you,
sorry,
as soon
go
as you come down Jeffrey's Way and take a
Turn right,
right.
there's houses
Yeah,
there.
there's all those houses.
All those
before you get-
houses are right there.
Yeah, the ones right there. No, historically, I don't know why they did not put in rocks, but.
I would think it's just the distance they are from the water. They
They're a
sit
long
quite
way.
quite a ways back from the
Not
others.
anymore, but.
But it was.
Yeah, not anymore,
was.
but,
It was.
I'd just like to say a couple of things about hardscaping, because I know it's a little confusing, and I've done a lot of research on it lately. And the thing is, like Goose Rocks, for example, the main part of the beach that has all of the rocks, from the tides west.
Right.
Okay? Those work fine when you're only dealing with an occasional storm that's gonna reach those rocks. The problem with hardscaping is when when the water level gets to that height where it's coming up to the rocks all the time, that's where you lose all the dry sand at the beach. Kennebunk Beach is a great example. You look at Kennebunk Beach where the seawall is, there's no beach at high tide. But if you go closer to the river, beyond the beach, there, suddenly there's grass because it's allowed to have the normal ebb and flow and the sand replenishes itself. So with another thing about sea rises, I think probably all aware now that the Gulf of Maine has warmed at a higher pace than any other body of water in the world.
Right.
And unfortunately, when it warms, the volume increases. And unlike a bathtub, the ocean, I just found this out recently, I always thought of the ocean like a bathtub. You put water in it, the glaciers melt, it's all gonna go, it doesn't. Because of currents and different things like that, sea rise is not equal around the world as it all doesn't go up at the same pace. It can go up higher in certain areas than others. I'm sure there are a lot of other factors to it. But, so the problem with that we're beginning to face, I think, is with if we were to put a barrier, along what I refer to as the public beach from the tides down, where we don't have walls now, if you do put walls up there, eventually you're gonna lose the beach. The dry sand part, it'll look like Kennebunk Beach. And on one hand, you might say, well, if that's the only option, that's the option. But as John mentioned, our big risk at Goose Rocks is the marsh in the back. A lot of that flooding
That was a lot.
The threat was from back there, same type, what you experienced, it came in from behind.
Yeah.
You know, so it's,
But the primary dune will still be there. There'd be one row of houses, 70 years from now, that may be all there is, and they'll be on septic fields because the sewer will be destroyed. So there's, there are a lot of factors we've got to look at in terms of what's going to make sense. And how much money would the state or the feds have to put in to buy how much time if you did hardscape? Because eventually, it's going to just be that primary dune, and then that'll probably be gone. And those are just the facts.
yeah.
And so what we've got to do as a town is just decide, not as a town, I think as individual homeowners, working with their assets and whatever else we're going to be able to pull together, what is going to be done to try to protect that? Because I don't see how the town can do it. Not unless everybody, if we want to put, $20 on our taxes to pay and it just wouldn't be fair.
That's all it took, I'd gladly
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Right now.
No, I mean $20 on the
Oh, all
housing.
right. Oh, I see. Sounded too.
So again, and these are gonna be tough decisions
Yeah.
that are gonna have to be made.
So can I just comment
Yeah.
for a minute? Because I think because of the recent storms, everybody's very hyper-focused on some certain problems, and we're
Touche.
probably getting off topic with the climate action plan.
Touche.
I don't disagree with anything that's been said here. I think there is room for, natural environments and landscapes, and, I've talked to Tom Bradbury at the Conservation Trust and about ways in which we can use some of our conservation land to help absorb. It's not just the sea, it's the rainwater events and the flooding we're having in other places and wetlands and storm runoff. So I think that we have to get more people and consultants involved in the right model for each situation. And I don't disagree with what Pam said about scouring, and I've walked the beach with Pete Slavinsky, the state geologist, who talks about that, and what happens at Kennebunk Beach. So every situation has a solution, or the best possible solution, with the pros you're most willing to accommodate. And I don't think the town can adjust everybody's particular situation on their private property, but maybe the town can invest in plans and models that we think work for different situations. So I think this has been a lot of good conversation, but I don't want we're not gonna solve the problem at Goose Rocks Beach tonight.
Exactly.
But I
Or
think,
Dock Square, which we haven't even
but I
brought
think
up.
the question is, do the strategies work for what we're trying to accomplish? And I think that strategy, the way it's stated right now, probably is a little narrowly focused. Someone could read it that way, and that maybe we do need to be a little more open-ended with it.
Yeah,
That's good
which you brought up,
feedback.
so thank you.
There's a lot of positive things that we can do, so.
Let's move on to the second.
The second one?
Or other folks who haven't had a chance to chime in just yet, not to cut you off, Mary Beth, but
No, John was just hitting me, so I was, it's okay.
if there are other parts of this that people also would like to chime in about, comments or questions, I'd love to.
I just have a couple of things.
Yes,
The areas where some words, some of the time the word is recommend, and then at other times it's require. I don't believe we're in a position yet where we should be requiring things. We can suggest to people, this is the best way to do it, we think, this is the way, but I don't believe that we should be saying, we're gonna require you to whatever. So,
okay. And can I just point out an example? I just flipped through the document and found, for example, are you talking about, there is an example in here about requiring hazard disclosure for property transactions. That would be a require, where if someone were to sell their property or put their property up for sale, they would be required to disclose.
I would think that that's a state
It is,
kind of thing.
it is, and that would be working with other communities to
But
recommend that.
that has nothing to do with us. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
We're not gonna require it,
not individually as a community, correct?
okay? There's a lot in here about solar, heating solar. Have any of you looked into what happens to the solar panels when they're done?
Yeah, they're cycled, same with the lithium batteries. They're ground up, put into what's called a black mass, which then is processed to try to remove, and they get quite a good return on removing. The technology has come a long way in terms of recycling both lithium batteries and solar cells and solar panels. So I think everything that I have read, Sheila, that is still on the positive balance in terms of the energy required to build the solar and the energy required to dispose of the waste. Compared to fossil fuel, I think it's a pretty easy choice, if that's what you're referring to.
Well, I don't know what you read. I haven't read quite the same thing.
Well, there are different sources out there. It's
Yeah.
always important to run those to ground in terms of the scientific
Yep.
underpinning and any other biases that might come in, who paid for the study, et cetera. So it's important to look at those things.
That's right. I think you were recommending that all the buses go electric for the RSU, that sort of thing.
That would
Have
be
you
an
checked-
example, yeah.
Have you checked into the cost?
Well, I do know that recently there's been quite a few grants available for communities to electrify their school buses. I don't know if you guys know about that.
Steve, did you talk to them about that?
The buses,
And you did see this week where the electric cars wouldn't start because it was too cold?
yeah.
Do you think that will happen to our buses?
Buses.
Because I don't want to have to take care of my grandkids because the buses didn't start.
Good
The
point.
buses are expensive. The RSU 21 has applied now 3 times for grants to receive buses and in their fleet, and they haven't succeeded yet. But Wells apparently has 11 electric buses, and so there's a sort of case study we can look at
Oh,
to see
good.
what the cost is and what the impact and how they function.
Okay.
And if they started.
And if they started.
Well, it's not a case of starting necessarily, it's range
Yeah,
in cold weather.
yeah.
And there was a part in there where you wanted to change all the municipal buildings to go electric. I would like you to compare what that would cost and where we would gain anything from it.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. There would be a cost benefit before anything was done.
Oh, good.
In terms of the heat pumps and the solar and everything, absolutely.
Okay.
And there are a number of those out there that have shown it, but we would do one specifically for any building that we were going to convert if that were to be chosen to do.
Well, I'm thinking of the high school. That's a huge space,
Sure. Sure.
Those would be
things like that.
industrial type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I got heat pumps this fall, and I'm comparing it to, and I'm tamping down the fuel.
The propane,
Yeah, fossil fuel, and comparing it, this was not a good month to compare it, because it was, but it looks to me like there's a net savings so far, but it hasn't been really cold either,
Right.
so.
Right, and the efficiency can go down. I know at the trust, when we
Yeah.
put the heat pumps in at the trust, they had propane heat. We had put them in, when I was on the board there, we put them in principally for the AC, because we didn't have
that works,
AC.
yeah.
And then that helped us keep it open in August, and so that was a good thing. So it was worth the expense right there. But then it turned out that our propane bill was significantly lower by having the electric heat pump. It wasn't the primary heat, but it offset sufficiently the amount of propane burned. So it was a good thing.
And that's what I like, is using the dual.
Oh, I think this would always be.
Yeah.
I would be very surprised if we would do something without continuing, because the infrastructure's there.
Yeah.
So you would never, rip out the fossil infrastructure. It's really how renewables are being used today all over, is that you need a backbone power source. You need a base. and then you're augmenting with the renewables. And it's gonna be a while before, I wish ours was nuclear instead of fossil, but that's my position. But at any rate, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Anything else?
that's it.
I got, how can we get at these strategies that can, looking for suggestion, how we can look at the strategies that could benefit the most of the people for the least amount of cost? So, you know, we're looking at emissions and we're looking at this and that, we're looking at some of the infrastructure, but how can we, you know, we've got 4,000 people in town, and how do we go ahead and implement the strategies that will affect
That's a
most of them
good question.
for the least amount of disruption, money-wise or whatever?
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the next step would be to take these strategies and do just that. You would prioritize them according to criteria, like you just said, Mike. Let's do the strategies that are gonna affect the greatest number of people in the least amount of costs, like we can,
Or distribute, whatever.
yeah,
You know, keeping emergency access to people, to be sure that the ambulances
right.
can
Yeah,
get
we
there,
haven't done
fires
that
can
work.
get there.
The
That's-
committee
yeah.
has not done that,
Well, I'm just
prioritized
thinking
really.
that, you know, we're asking for the Board of Selectmen to, the Select Board, to approve a way forward in March and on this. And I'm just saying, I would prefer, even though I've worked on this, and I mean, I've done some work on it, I would prefer that we do something for the most people, the least disturbance and the as lowest cost possible.
Best return on the dollar.
Best return on the dollar, there you go.
Yep.
So, and I would again, I'd go with what Sheila says, use the word recommend instead of required. And then don't make it a task, but make it people want to do it, you know, it's, if we can. Emissions is one thing, I mean, that's one of the ones. Yeah, the other argument we get too, that we've got to make sure that we dispel it is that well, we're just Kennebunkport. And gee, that's what we're doing is not gonna make a bit of difference in the world, but if every town did it and everybody else did it, then it's gonna add up. So I think you start at home and you move forward, so, anyway, yeah.
So we're adding some kind of a criteria?
I just
A way
think,
we would take the strategies that are there now, and instead of trying to go through in the next few months, which would be a lot, and prioritize them, would be setting up a criteria table, so you could understand how those decisions.
Yeah, but I wonder if that isn't something that would go more to the follow-on.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what we
Committee.
talked, that's what we talked about, I just wanna,
Yeah.
don't know if that's what Mike is
well,
talking
you're
about.
asking us to approve something, which is it's a large document.
Right,
And I believe in the document. But what are we approving if it's not action? And we don't know what the cost of that action is. So I just would like to see us, I don't care if we pick 2, 3, or 4 or something and say, well, this would give us the biggest bang for the buck, or the biggest impact on the environment, but we can't do them all. So why don't we focus on what we can do for the most people? Or the most houses, or the most businesses, whatever.
So the other towns, if we can ask you two, I don't know if that's been part of the plans of the other communities to actually go through and do what you just asked, Mike, which is rather than saying, these are the tasks or the strategies that we think are appropriate for the town, and then once the plan has been accepted, then we get to work at doing what you just suggested. I don't know, what have the other towns done? Have they tried to do some of that work up front as part of the plan?
So Corinna, can you just move the mic?
Better? So in Biddeford, they did identify within all their strategies, they called out priority strategies, which are the ones they're gonna focus on first and
That's what I'm
most
after.
thoroughly. Yeah, they decided on those priority strategies based on public input. So those were the ones that sort of had the biggest and broadest community support. But they did also include in their plan a column sort of next to their strategy table that had impact and a column that had cost. So you could then go in and say, high impact for reducing emissions or promoting resilience and low cost and call those out. But I agree that that's sort of the next step in implementation.
Well, I guess I'm thinking of it in terms of, we've got a whole menu here of items. And we've got a limited number of people who can do these things or work on these things. And we've got a limited number of resources that we can apply now or maybe 6 months from now or whenever. So I really think if we could pick out the ones that affect the most people with the less disturbance and the lowest cost, but has an impact, we'd be further ahead of the game. Because we're gonna be sitting here looking at, hey, you want us to approve this in March? And I'm saying, I don't know that I can approve it in March because I don't know what the impact's gonna be. I don't wanna commit the town to all of this stuff that I think is necessary if we don't know how we're gonna do it, who's gonna do it, and what it's gonna cost.
Yeah, I don't think the plan's asking to commit the town to do it. It kind of parallels the comprehensive plan in that sense. I mean, it's aspirational in the sense that it is not saying you shall, and that's the whole point. We will or you shall do this and that. It's laying out the general, it's actually giving voice to a lot of what's in the comprehensive plan. It's reorganized a lot. You saw the crosswalk and,
Yeah, I
and
know, I
how much
agree,
of that,
yeah.
how much of that is covered. And it's applying a framework for the resiliency and for reducing emissions and some ideas on how we could enable that action that then the town would follow through with decisions from the board as to which ones are important, what would be done when those further details become available. So
So I'll ask the question
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
What are we approving?
So can I just, I'm with Mike. Actually, this was too much, you know. I hear what you're saying, John, and I understand about the comprehensive plan, and that in itself provides the town with a very, very broad painting landscape of what we could, should, maybe.
Of everything.
Of
So
everything.
many- that's right, that's what it's meant to do,
This was,
focusing that.
not enough focus. I would say it's too much. And that's why I try to come in and say, create resilience infrastructure. We're already doing that. So we don't need to replicate, we don't need to have another document that states it. We've already got stuff inside. So when I was reading through this today, I actually marked up, it's already covered, you know, no to regulations, you know, not gonna, and, you know, I was aligning with Sheila with, you know, and so that's why I was trying to come back, and I think when you guys came a couple months ago and we just sort of volleyed some ideas, or you were giving us where you were, I really thought when you came, this conversation, it was really gonna be, and again, that was my perception, so I might have had the wrong perception. It was gonna be more of, what can we have people do? You know, here's the recommendations for our residents to, you know, become more energy efficient, you know, for your individual household, you know, not to come in and say, here's regulations. That sort of was the wrong approach to me. I was expecting more of, hey, there's grants if you need to update your windows. This is how you know, just whatever. Heat pumps are good, you know, if this is the trade-off, you know, look here for this information. I thought that's what, you know, we were, you know, I sort of thought that that's where we were headed last time.
I don't know whether this responds to your, to the issue you're raising, the issues Mike raising, but we have had initial discussions
Can you
about.
talk into the microphone? one of them?
Well, I think is that good enough?
Move it right close to, it has to
We've
be
had,
right at your mouth.
we've had a number of discussions early on about accompanying this set of strategies, which really represents a long-term process of addressing certain issues with a proposed first-year implementation plan. And it seems to me that that is something that obviously would need the scrutiny of the board, of the select board, and also its approval.
But I think coming forward with 9 buckets it's unattainable in terms of trying to then set something actionable. And,
But-
you know, I'd made a comment to Lori before about, you know, if this was in my old work world, we would have said this is boiling the ocean, no pun intended at all. And that means the scope of it is unattainable, we'll never be successful because of what Mike brought up. We don't have enough resources. And so we really want to focus on things. We know that we're not going to stop the change that our town is under right now. So what are the things that we can do for our homeowners, our residents, to alleviate, you know, what they're probably going to be looking at over the next 10 years or 20 years or something. We're not going to be able to turn that tide back. We're not going to be able to reduce the water level. But what could we do? And so I think that's where this is a good document for climate, you know, but I can't take this and say, I agree with Mike. I can't take this document and say I can approve it because I really don't know what I'm approving. You know, there's just a lot. So that was a lot of words to say it's a lot.
We know that, and I don't think we expected everybody to just buy it all carte blanche, you know, and say, this is it. We know there has to be a narrowing of the options, you know, but we didn't want to actually do all of that and then come to you and say, here are the 3 things, you know, so.
So what you're hearing right now, because it is sort of a workshop, what you're hearing from us or at least from a couple of us right now, what would be out of the 9, what would be the 3 things from you guys that would be the top, hey, this is, you know, this is where the town should.
Don't ask that, you answer that. What are the 3 things that you think we should take out of that 9? I mean, the point is the 9 are the thing, these are things we feel important.
Okay.
If you're saying there's.
Okay, so, all right, okay, so that's good. So
then
create,
take out your narrow.
okay, so create resilient infrastructure. I think that's already in the
agree.
town, and we've got that, but it's good that we're aligned, that we all think we should do that. I think the protection of the natural resources, that's a little iffy because of our discussion today. We don't know how we would actually do
Well, it's
that.
important for the marshes, you know, again, for carbon sequestration, that's an important piece, but, let's go ahead, from the resiliency side, I tend to agree with you, go ahead.
So you can come back if there's something around the natural resources and there's something you want to say, hey, let's clarify that a little bit. That's one that you could come back with, okay? Because I don't, from what I'm reading, I couldn't pull it out.
It comes again. on the
Okay.
natural sequestration.
So number 3 is create energy resilience safeguard for the residents. So this was the solar discussion.
Well, it's also about the grid.
So, yeah, so I actually talked, and so this is where I talked with Chris.
Simeone?
Yeah, so what he's doing, I'm sure Lori is aware of this, you know, so when we get into the budget center system, I asked him before during one of our storms, you know, what CMP's action, you know, what do they do, what don't they do, and then what do we do from town? So on the budget session, Chris was actually gonna pull out tree trimming for shade trees, because it's in one bucket, and then our streets, and that we actually have to step it up and start doing more things to get trees away from our lines. And so that was gonna sort of show up at our budget session this year with a higher dollar amount. And I think that's something, you know, that we got away from. Everybody got away from that. And that's something that we've got to go back, and maybe it's a 5-year, Chris was saying maybe it's a 5-year thing that we've got to go into, because, you know, then you can scale down, right? Because you got the cream of the crop at the beginning. But when I drive down Goose Rocks Road, I mean, these guys are just leaning. They're going to take out a power line, you know, in the next breath. Mills Road is the same thing. There's a lot of roads here with that. So I think that's something that's covered under Chris, but if there's something else in that that needs to be pulled out, that would be something. The resilience disaster thing, that's where I circled that as, okay, I think there's something here, because I don't know from Lori, if you can chime in, I don't know if we have business resumption plans from a citizen approach, like this last storm, wellness checks, is there a place for people to go? And I think that's, when I was reading through the booklet, that's sorted, if I'm understanding, that's what you guys were getting at. And I think that's a hole, right? Is that a hole right now in terms of what we have or not?
It's not a hole. The hole is people don't want to leave their homes.
Okay.
Yeah. Typical.
So can I just comment a little bit? So I don't disagree with your analysis that that some of these things are covered, or that we're working on some of these things. Government is only dependent upon the people who sit here. And when that changes, priorities change. And you can see that happen as you see managers change. So, part of what the comp plan does, when I get to a community, the first thing I do is I pull up the comp plan. Because that to me is a resource. It's a resource of data, of surveys, of community input, and what are the strategies, what are things people are worried about. Sometimes the comp plan's too large, and and it's not specific enough, but the comp plan is a good document for documenting how we're gonna move forward. And a lot of these strategies do come from the comp plan. But without a climate plan or a document that the board accepts that says, this is why we're making the choices we do, like the comp plan, those priorities can change quickly, because staff who are fulfilling those roles don't have a document by which to go by. And so right now, we're spending a lot of time focused on road infrastructure and climate change and things like that, we'll call it climate change, but, the buffeting of our infrastructure and the concern about the resiliency of our infrastructure. And why is that? I think it's because it's a priority for me personally, and I have board support. But if I left and somebody else came in here, that would just go off over here, depending on the people sitting around the table, without some kind of document. So even though these things are being covered now, and I'm just using that as an example, and it doesn't mean that another board couldn't adopt other goals, but it is a basic structure by which staff goes back to its elected board and says, this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is the direction you gave us. Here's the documentation of that direction. And so even though some things are being done, just keep in mind, it is the way you direct staff to focus on subject matter. And,
Can I just say one more?
yep,
And this is the town plan. When we vote for that, and I'm just speaking for myself, it's not that, and I didn't agree with everything in the comprehensive plan.
what?
But there was enough in there where I voted yes. So that's, that was just one indication of why things change. Because what's important to you may not be important to me.
Right, absolutely. And it evolves, right? And
Yeah.
we shouldn't all stick with what we have. But I think that where I'm hearing the board is, this board takes its responsibilities very seriously. And what I'm hearing tonight is the discussion that we don't want to commit to something that we don't feel we can commit to, we can deliver. And that they know, having just sat through the capital plan and having toured the town after the damage, and it's scary sitting with me about how much there is to do. And I think what I'm hearing from this board is, we don't want to have a lot of visionary ideas that we can't bring to fruition. We're nervous about that because we understand our responsibility and our commitment.
And part of that comes from, a little bit from me, is that I had asked the committee to blend in the comprehensive plan and what the, and you've done a good job at doing that and highlighting that, and I appreciate that. But I worked on the comprehensive plan from 2003 to 2007, and I'll bet you 2/3 of everything that we put in there with assignments and people direction, et cetera, haven't been done. And it's not because people don't want to do it, it's because it's a list like this, and the human resources aren't there, the money's not there. People change, you know, the people. Priorities change, people leave and so forth. I'm just, my only thing is that, you know, and I worked on this and I understand it. I just think that if we could just narrow it down to some critical things that we can accomplish, like Lori said. I hate to approve something again that is a comprehensive listing or strategies that we don't have a chance to complete in my lifetime.
And part of it is like what the comprehensive plan, you know, and I think I'm resonating with what Lori and Mike are saying. It's really hard because we're trying to maneuver through different avenues. And when we get to certain points and where we made decisions and all of a sudden somebody stands up, and specifically with the comprehensive plan, and says, well, you know, chapter 12, verse 7, you know, this is in our comprehensive plan, but we can't square it, you know. And so then I'm sort of with Mike, I don't want another document that we can't square. Because it does mean, you know, it does mean stuff to people. It means stuff, like Lori said, it means stuff for direction, but as Mike said, there's trade-offs along the way. And I think that's where I was headed, was trying to boil it down.
I guess I thought I heard something a little different from Lori, that having this kind of a plan, even though it may be a bit broader, is important to have those pieces in place so that when the town does decide to take up that piece, they've got direction as to what the intent of the select board was. It's not that we're going to do everything all at once, but everything in this plan, I believe, are important things that need to be done. And whether we can get them all done in your lifetime, maybe not. But we'll at least have the framework that we can work within when it is time to do pieces of it.
And also, if I could just interject, the other thing too, the plans are important for is because you use your plan as a document when you're applying for grants. And so if we have things in our plan, then that's justification for us when we go out and apply for some of the grant money that's out there. At least that's my understanding. Is that true, Karina?
Very much so, yeah.
Yes.
So I worry that if we eliminate things from the plan.
Elements are in the comprehensive plan, and this is taking elements of that, but it has actually focused some of those elements and prioritized them. And
So-
that's why not everything is in here.
I was just going to ask Corinne and Abby to talk at a broader perspective outside of the town of Kennebunkport about climate action plans and why the state and the feds want us to do a climate action plan and how we might actually use it and how other communities are. You have 20 minutes.
Okay, yeah, right. I have jotted down some things I wanted to bring up, and I think a couple of them been brought up. First and foremost, Lori, exactly what you brought up is that this is a guidance document for staff, for the community, and for partner organizations to figure out things that you can take action on. So it is hard. It has to be both broad and specific. You want to cover a lot of things, but then have specific action items within them that people can pick off. And I think it's really hard to figure out what is actually actionable in the next, 3 to 5 years, because it's very dependent on what grants are available, what the state is doing, what other towns in the region are doing, and there are opportunities that come up, and you don't want to miss out on those because you didn't put them in your plan, for things that we've done sort of regionally, like the grant we just got for the new weatherization and heat pump incentive program for the 5 towns in our region. So the Climate Action Plan serves that purpose of sort of being this guidance document. It's proof of the community support and engagement around climate actions that then you can use to go and get federal grants. And it's also a record of what's already been done so that that's not lost when there is turnover. Part of the plan is sort of the background information, what Kennebunkport's already doing, so that people don't waste time and resources reinventing the wheel and doing it again. That was a kind of short thing that didn't answer all your questions, but a big part of this that I wanted to bring up.
Could I just?
Yeah.
Real quick, so the state sees the climate action plan as something separate alongside, but separate than the comprehensive plan. So it is an entity that's important to the state. And they will base grants, eligibility and things of that sort will be weighed by whether this plan addresses it.
I think it's more for federal funding.
Good,
The
they
state,
got more money than the state.
that cares
So,
about
all
it,
right.
yeah. Because comprehensive plans are like, they're a main specific thing. Different states have different municipal, like, strategic planning. But a climate action plan is a climate action plan, and it's sort of recognized both nationally and internationally of what it's trying to achieve, which is to increase resilience and reduce emissions to climate change.
So Karina, do we register the, like, Kennebunkport, Kittery and Biddeford, do we register those plans with somebody or not?
No,
I think it's more about, it's like when we applied for the GoPIF funds.
Yeah.
You have to, you guys took the pledge that you were gonna be a community, we met the criteria. I think that they would ask for your plan as part of those grant documents, and you check the box, yes, we have a plan, and submit it. So it is something on the state level as well, because really the state's just using federal funds to pass
Right.
out. So I think it is something, and, you know, it's like the comp plan, the last comp plan go around. You know, I look at that list and I go, wow. And, you know, and there are people who do come to meetings and say, why haven't you accomplished this? This was in the comp plan. Why didn't you do it? And it's unreasonable to think we're gonna do everything. But one of the strategies in the comp plan is to try and create a wide enough net so that when opportunity knocks, you have the documentation to take advantage of it. You know, you
Yeah.
can, because people will say, is it in the comp plan? And so you have to go looking for where in the comp plan it is.
So if we were gonna do that generalization, then I think that's okay, in some areas, but then you go pretty, pedantic in some areas. And like, for example, number 6, you go to, convert homes and large buildings from fossil fuels to all electric heating and cooling via air source and ground source heat pumps and electric appliance. I just think that's, you know, I'm still of diversification. I'm not pure electric. And, you know, so that doesn't resonate me and with a lot of people that I've talked to.
Let's take away that word all, I
Yeah,
think
and that's
that's
an
important.
example
That
that we
was an
certainly
example,
don't
but
need
that's
to
what those things are, but still, it'd be important.
But this,
Just again,
you
yep,
know,
go ahead.
but I just think that's, I bring that out because if I listen to what Lori said, and, I'm sorry.
Karina.
Karina,
That's all right.
what Karina had just walked through. If we're trying to create a document that gives the town some guidance, and if it wants to be more than what we can bite off and chew, but gives us direction for the future, that's fine. But then you go in great detail in some areas, you know, and I think
So if I could
it can't
just-
be both.
Yeah, so here's the deal. When we presented just in this document, it was the first 2 columns to people in the community. They said, we don't really know what this means. When you say you want the town to promote building electrification incentive programs, what is that? And so that's why we came up with these examples. But the examples,
But I would say I don't even know if I want the town to build electrification programs. I think that's my point. And then you go down to the next one and you say, let's recommend reducing gas-powered, you know, small engines for landscapers. I just think we've gone, like, for me, that's just a little bit too far.
okay, that was
You
a
know, it-
community member actually
No,
that
but
brought
that to
forward.
me is it's just a little too far,
We
you
can,
know?
we can
and that's-
agree
yeah,
to
that's-
disagree, we can agree
right.
to disagree on that, because to me, that ain't quite far enough. So that's, so it's going to be fun. It's a matter of, it's balance there.
And, you know, that goes with the with what I said. It's you recommend. You
Right.
don't make people do something, you recommend. And if a landscaper wants to buy an electric lawnmower, then more power to him.
But I don't know if we're creating a document that's supposed to just maybe help be a catch-all for some grants and stuff, and/or give us specific things for the town to work on. I don't know why we would be putting in any words that would go after private citizens that are running businesses. To me, that's too far. It doesn't do anything to restore a grant. I'm talking about the gas power as an example. It doesn't do anything to get us grant money. It doesn't do anything for within the town reasoning. It's going after something that somebody believes in. And this is where I want to keep the community together on this. I am not one. I'm not a sole person out there. There's not just one of me that wants the diversification. And, you know, I've read a lot of papers. I have a science background, and so I read things. And so I still have not completely bought off on the emissions as something that's causing everything. I've read too many papers that are contrary. I would like to have a political debate of our scientists in our country that go back and forth, and we hash this out, and we can get to some reasonable thing. And so that's just me. I'm different. I heard what Mike said. You know, so you have different voices on the board. There's different voices in our community. I want this document not to alienate or cause somebody that doesn't have that view to go, ooh, this doesn't feel right. I want to find that common ground. I want to find that common ground that we can actually do something as a town and bring everybody together. That's like where I reside.
What's the debate on emissions?
Just one second, let me, Alan has wanted to say something, I think.
Sure.
Alan?
You hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I would, you know, when I'm looking at this, it is rather large. And like you just said a while ago, we can't do it all. It's impossible to do it all. And what really bothers me most is regulate and change policies. Usually when you go to regulate something and change policies, it has a huge impact on property owners. And I also don't think that we're there to be able to, this document, I don't think should be, they shouldn't be trying to regulate, we shouldn't try to regulate and change policies because it's going to cause a lot of heartache, and not only that, a lot of money. And people that own land and everything else, I think it should be up to them how they sell their property or use their property to a certain degree where it doesn't cause harm to other people. And I just don't think that this document should have regulate and change policies in it.
What's the regulate and change?
I'm looking to find
Those are
that.
just examples
Right.
still, but.
Yeah, so we did conduct a review of ordinances and policies to identify changes to reduce emissions and runoff and build resiliency, including streamlining approval processes and reducing barriers, so.
And Fred has a great example of that, from
What, the
Goose Rocks.
stairs
On the-
example?
No, the one in terms of raising your house.
Gonna
where
need
you
the
get above
microphone.
floodwater.
You need the
Carol?
microphone, you
Carol,
can't talk
they
without the
can't- they
microphone,
can't
sorry,
hear you.
Carol.
I was actually trying to get Fred to talk.
I'm trying to catch your drift here.
Fred and I ran into each other at Goose Rocks Beach the other day right after the storm, and he lives down there, and he was telling me how his house was being engulfed by water, and he had talked about raising it, and the problem is that with the current height restrictions,
Right.
some of these houses that could get another couple decades maybe out of being raised illegally currently cannot be raised because of our ordinances. So that might be something that, doesn't cause heartache, actually alleviates people's heartache because they could adapt their houses themselves. So those are the kinds of things that we talked about looking at. That's what that one that Pam just read is meant to cover, that sort of evaluation.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that any ordinance that would be modified would come to this board first. I mean, this isn't giving a climate committee the ability to dictate changes. It's going to suggest some things, and the board can say, no, that's too onerous, I don't want to do it. Or, so I'm not understanding the angst.
Yeah, well, actually, we raised our house, we got it completely redone, and 3 years ago, we raised it, but up 3 feet, but we were still limited to the height. So if we're saying,
2.5 stories?
No, it's feet.
yeah,
Feet.
yeah, so, if we recognize, like, again, to use, all the flooding we've had, and if we're recommending to people, if you're doing a new build, or if you're, or if you feel your house, you're tired of it being flooded all the time and you want to raise it, then I don't think it's a big deal for us to say, the town to say, okay, well, we're going to increase the height restriction another 4 or 5 feet or whatever.
Yeah,
And that doesn't
yeah.
cost anybody anything.
That's right. It would come to the Board of Selectmen, and then it would go to the town for vote. It's an
Those are the
ordinance
kinds of
change.
things that we're
I
talking
gotcha.
about.
Yeah, I
Right.
understand
Yeah.
that now, yeah.
And another one in that vein that some people might not like, but if you look at all of the flooding, a lot of, like Goose Rocks is nothing but a sandbar. That's all that is. But I don't think it would be unreasonable to tell people you have to use, like you're putting in a new driveway or something, it has to be porous, whether it's cement blocks or whatever. But, as we know, if you've got a lot of places that are paved, that's not allowing anything to get soaked into the ground. And again, some people might not like it, some people like pavement and everything else, but if you want to do something to help, curtail the flooding and, when that water's there, it's not gonna sink into the pavement, but if it's something porous, it'll drain quicker. So little things like that we could do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I was having trouble when I was reading this, because I'm also on the board for the growth planning, and we're looking at LD 2000-003, and I don't know how that works in our town, with additional,
What is that?
it's the density from the state of Maine. So changing, well, you'll hear all about it when we get through it, but it basically is creating more housing.
Oh, I see.
But we have.
Oh, I see,
But
yeah,
we
yeah.
have,
Okay.
but to your point, we have issues already with
Yeah.
water runoff. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to square all of that of how does that work? It doesn't seem like it does,
No easy answers.
especially when we're looking at,
Mhm.
the water issues.
But it sounds like we've gone around, and we do need to get direction back to the task force in terms of their next steps. Can I suggest that we've come to a conclusion that having having the breadth of this is understandable, given the what it's trying to serve, the purpose it's trying to serve, but we may want to take out those examples that look like they're becoming very specific and telling you, we want to gasoline engines, or we want to, so make it, try not to push buttons. Leave wiggle room for interpretation when it comes to the board to make these kinds of decisions.
But I don't think there's any problem with having those in there, as you say you
Right.
recommend.
Right.
Well, they're not even recommendations, honestly,
They're
Mike.
just
They're just
examples.
examples, and sort of take
Okay.
it or leave it. It's just to help people understand
Yeah.
what these strategies
can
are.
say-
How they might be implemented.
They were really, they were really just a communication device.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And that suggestion, for instance, about the landscaper, that might,
It wouldn't be in there.
Right.
yeah.
We could
Or if
just
you
remove
did, it
those.
would give, a private person, oh, maybe I could do that.
It's your choice.
But
But
I
it's
think,
your
Totally.
but I
choice.
think those are things that can be in. So here's my thing about having it anywhere tagged as a recommendation in a document that goes like this. I do not want to create somebody walking up to somebody and say, well, you're not helping our climate. Why are you using a gas-powered? I just don't want to give that mechanism. If there wants to be a document, like you said, about, there's the one section that says, you know, helping homeowners, you know, residents being more efficient and effective. If you want to list a whole bunch of things in that for ideas, like, oh, I could go buy electric, these, and this would save this, that's, I think, is where it should be, you know, as a means to help, but not under those other areas. I think those could actually, I just don't want to get like a neighbor looking at another neighbor saying, geez, you know, you're not really helping out your grandkids. You know, I just, you know.
I do that now. I don't see anything wrong with it.
Okay.
I was gonna say.
I don't think you could legislate that, actually.
Right.
And
Okay,
and
so,
I think the goal is that once a plan was established, then they develop a work plan.
Right.
Yeah, that was
And a
the
work
goal.
plan has a time limit that they come back and say, here's what we're gonna try and accomplish over the next year or 2 years or whatever. And that's where that
That's where we-
specificity would come in.
Exactly.
Go.
Yeah, good.
And I would just say, if we could go lower, I understand that we want to give guidance for grants and we want to have areas for that type of stuff, but if we could really take a fine tooth and comb and really look at the 9, and is there things that we just don't, it's just you know, it's a large piece, and I'm an anti-boil the ocean type of person. I like things that I can see that we can actually deliver on at some point in our lives.
I just would like to say, because knowing what the other communities have in their plans, I know that's not something that really drives you guys in any way, but they have twice as many strategies in their plan. So these
we
guys,
started with
these
74.
guys did an amazing job in cutting it down to what we have now. So that was definitely moving in the same direction that you're trying to go.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate that. So thank you.
I just wanted to add that one thing for you guys we might be able to do between now and the next time this stuff comes before this board is add some context for what's achievable. So not only like the impact in a general cost sense, but also maybe like, are there good opportunities right now for grants or things we know coming up? Because we're always collecting that info.
That's great. So I just want to check with the task force. Do you all feel like you know what we need to do next? And I know we have you and Mike who can continue to gather input from your fellow select board members. And I know you've got a bunch of comments on your document, and it would be great if you could share those with John so that we make sure we can gather everything and that we don't miss anything. That would be really helpful.
I think you've done a good job.
Yeah.
This was very useful,
Well,
guys.
this
Thank
is
you.
what it's all about, right? We have to kind of hash it out and figure out what's going to
Yeah,
work.
and don't take anything that we've talked about as criticism. So it's not personal.
Yeah, we get that. Thank you.
As long as everybody uses electric blowers, I'm
Right.
okay.
I don't want to see you using your gas-powered mower.
I'm gonna bring my gas-powered motor and just be driving around town.
On the beach.
Right.
Thanks, Steve.
So are we all set?
Thanks, Steve.
John, you're running the meeting.
I am, aren't I? Yeah.
You were facilitating.
That's that one, I won't tell you the joke, it's a good joke. Yes, so are there any more questions from the board?
Alan, do you have any questions?
No, I'm all set, thank you. It was a really
Okay, Alan.
good session.
Having heard none, I think I would turn this back over to you, Mike.
Okay. So, does anybody in the audience have any questions they'd like to ask, or? I mean, it's one of the few times I ever asked that. So, pardon? There's a hand raised on Zoom. Okay, who's on Zoom? Melinda? Go ahead.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, hi. I have been listening and I appreciate everybody's time and I really appreciate the dialogue that's going back and forth with the board and the committee. I mean, it's been very interesting to hear you folks all, you know, kind of push it back and forth and try and find a way. So what I was hoping to see was, in the plan, was enhancing our recycle program. I mean, in my opinion, for time and money spent by our tax dollars, whether by our town funding or federal funds, would be better suited working to establish a plan for a town transfer station the transfer station would help residents to recycle more. It's a hands-on approach that educates everyone by doing, and I really feel that awareness is the first step to change. And so to truly educate by recycling would be helpful. Clean cardboard drop-off has been, something I keep approaching anyone who will listen to add that back to our town to get clean cardboard, and that has some financial worth for sure if it's clean. And I think it's a true, simple, attainable step to help with our renewable resources, which in exchange helps with climate change. Clean cardboard can be recycled many times over and over to make new products, which is renewable. I mean, it's just a resource that, in my mind, is such a simple way for us to do our part as citizens and as a town. Our current recycling program is currently all mixed together. So like when I wash out the cat food can and the tuna fish can, it gets mixed in with the paper and bottles, and it's maybe a feel-good approach, but again, it is not the most effective measure to help with renewable resources. So I think our town can follow other towns by providing a transfer station where everyone can go and sort their recycle and feel like they're really doing a part to help with climate change, because if we don't use all our resources up, we're doing our part, even on a simple part of that, with all the businesses. And Bradbury's used to have the recycle dumpster, I'm going to call it, which is not a good word to say clean, but they had a dumpster. So all of the boxes and, huge amounts of things that they unpacked the cardboard could be saved and renewed. All the businesses in town, there was one in Allison's, that all of that's items that we, or not me, but that the town of Kennebunkport brings in to unpack and then sell. All that cardboard had a clean way to be recycled. I have a business. I'm 5 Acre Farm, and we do use a lot of cardboard, and I would love to see our town do more for recycling. And I know we're hiring new people all the time. I know we have an event coordinator, and we now have, I think I've heard we have a greeter. So I think if we use our resources for new employees, in my mind, it would go towards a transfer station where, you could have a baler and somebody to run the forklift. I mean, we have that now. I don't know how many town-paid employees we have at the town barn, but I think that's a simple way that I would feel would be the right step. And I was hoping to see more of recycling in the plan. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
How's that?
what's that?
Okay, I'm going to ask Lori to, nobody out there has, okay? No other hands raised?
Mike is just asking everybody to.
Yeah, I tell you. I want to have Lori give us an update on the storm damage, if she wants to.
Yes, so, I just want to first thank staff who worked around the clock and over the weekend to deal with the second storm of the week. Right now, we've been working on cleanup of various issues. There's still cleanup to be done. We had a winter storm in the midst of all of that. And we were able to get the water levels at the west end of Kings Highway down. We have more issues down there with the road and the sand cleanup that the staff are working on. We've got road damage on Ocean Avenue. Staff has talked about ways in which we might bring that section of road back to a usable state by gravel only, so it would be gravel. I'm a little concerned about the next storm and whether it would wash everything out. We also have some concern about the road on Ocean Avenue and down in Dock Square and some of the support underneath the pilings and the businesses there. We're addressing, so we have, Chris and I and Eric have two different sets of engineers coming in town tomorrow to both look at some public facilities as well as some of those road and infrastructure. So I want to get their feedback and input before we come up with a plan, because we're trying to spend the money wisely. Good news is DEP finally gave approval in Army Corps today to do the plans we had planned last summer for Colony Beach.
Oh, God.
So, but we're not planning to move forward with any of that right now. Colony Beach is still under, is closed to vehicular traffic. Certainly pedestrians can go out there. That's one of the sites we'll look at tomorrow. Maine State Emergency Management is taking declarations from counties. The January 10th storm was due today, and we put in our estimates, and the January 13th storm estimates are due on Monday. And so once the governor is requesting the federal government declare a state of emergency, so we need to hear that. We are requesting that both storms be considered one declaration, but we don't know how the feds will determine that. And in order to qualify for a declaration, we need to meet 940,000 in York County and 2.2 million in the state. I'm assuming from what I'm seeing in the news that we will be able to meet that criteria. I also.
Throw my dock in.
Throw your dock in. So I did want to make sure, we did put notice out there a couple days ago, private property owners and business property owners. There are two kinds of declarations that can be made from FEMA. One is for public assistance, which would be the town. The other is private assistance, which would be for individuals. And so individuals should certainly report any damages to their homeowner's insurance, whether they think it's covered or not. And also, though, there is an online survey if you go to the governor's website under their Flood Resources and Assistance Hub. And so it's called a survey because that's what they're doing right now. They're surveying how many uninsured properties there are that experience damage. They're surveying the concentration of those properties, as well as the estimate on the amounts. And so those will be also submitted to the feds so that we can get a determination on whether there will be assistance for individuals as well as public assistance. So we'll put that link out again, but you can go to the governor's website, and that has a link to this online survey. So this is a survey, it is not an application. If you submit the survey, keep in mind that after there is a declaration and it comes out with whether there was individual assistance, you would still need to go through the process of applying. So remember, when you're hoping for some assistance, documentation, documentation, documentation. Take photos before, during, after. Keep all receipts. It's quite a process now to get reimbursed.
Any questions? No? Okay, thanks, Lori. Any other business, Mary Beth?
No, I just echo and thankful that the town took, Lori and the team took us around Sunday so that we could get eyes on stuff. It was very helpful.
Was. John, anything else?
Nothing else.
Sheila?
No, I'd like to thank the Highway Department for cleaning our street right away, and everybody else who worked on it. I saw the fire chief down day after day, looking at properties and things. So thank you guys very much, and gals, and onward and upward.
Alan, anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, Lori? Galen? Nothing, huh? Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Pam, Carol,
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you, everybody.
Great.